10 years ago, I signed a piece of paper that ended my career, my marriage, and almost my life. Today, I signed a different piece of paper, and this one ended theirs. My name is David Reyes, and this is the story of how I lost everything I built and how I took it all back. I founded Sterling Logistics from a one-bedroom apartment when I was 26. No investors, no family money, just me, a laptop, and a stubborn refusal to give up. For 8 years, I poured everything into that company. I miss birthdays. I miss my father's funeral because we were closing a deal that, looking back, didn't even matter. I told myself it would all be worth it. By year 8, Sterling had 300 employees and contracts with companies most people would recognize. I brought in 2 partners along the way, Marcus and Elena, because I needed help scaling and because I trusted them. Marcus had been my college roommate. Elena was sharp, ambitious, the kind of person who could read a room before she even walked into it. I should have read the room better myself. It started small. Meetings I wasn't invited to. Decisions made and explained to me after the fact. I told myself it was just growing pains, 3 founders, busy schedules, nothing personal. Then one Tuesday morning, I walked into the office and my key card didn't work. I stood there at the door, badge in hand, while people I'd hired walked past me without making eye contact. Someone finally let me in. I went straight to Marcus's office. He didn't even stand up. "David, we need to talk about a transition." A transition. That's what he called it. Apparently, while I'd been focused on landing our biggest client of the year, Marcus and Elena had spent 6 months quietly buying out smaller shareholders, restructuring the board, and building a case. My case for why I was no longer the right fit for where the company is going. They had the votes. They had the lawyers. They had everything except the decency to tell me to my face until it was already done. I asked Marcus, point blank, "How long have you been planning this?" He looked at me and said, "Does it matter?" It mattered to me. It mattered because 3 days earlier, he'd had dinner at my house. My wife had cooked. My daughter had shown him her science project. And the entire time, he already knew. The severance was almost insulting, barely enough to cover 2 months of expenses, with a non-compete clause so broad it basically meant I couldn't work in logistics, consulting, or anything remotely adjacent for 3 years. I fought it. Of course I fought it. I hired a lawyer, spent what little savings I had on legal fees, and lost. Not because I was wrong, but because Marcus and Elena had spent those 6 months building a paper trail that made it look like I'd been disengaged, erratic, checked out for over a year. Forwarded emails. Selectively edited meeting notes. A performance review I never signed. It was a masterclass in betrayal, and I hadn't seen a single page of it coming. The company I built, the one with my name on the original incorporation papers, rebranded within 4 months. New logo, new website. My name disappeared from the About Us page like it had never existed. My marriage didn't survive what came next. Not because my wife didn't love me, she did, but because I wasn't the same person anymore. I was angry all the time. I stopped sleeping. I started drinking more than I should have. I pushed away the people who were trying to help because some part of me believed I didn't deserve help. I deserved the company, and it was gone. We separated 8 months after I lost Sterling. She kept the house. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment that felt a lot like the one I'd started the company in, except this time I wasn't 26 and full of ambition. I was 35, broke, legally barred from my own industry, and convinced my career was over. For a while it was, I want to be honest about something. There was no single dramatic moment where I decided to come back. There was just a slow, grinding decision to survive, and somewhere along the way, surviving turned into something else. The non-compete didn't cover everything. It was airtight for logistics and consulting, but it said nothing about manufacturing or warehousing infrastructure or, critically, commercial real estate. I noticed something during those months of unemployment, scrolling through industry news out of habit, half out of spite. Sterling was growing fast. Too fast. They were leasing warehouse space in 5 cities, locking themselves into long-term contracts with property management companies that, frankly, didn't have a great reputation for stability. I had an idea, a small one, almost a joke at first. What if I bought into commercial real estate, specifically the kind of properties that logistics companies need. Warehouses, distribution centers, the physical buildings that companies like Sterling rent but don't own. I had no money, but I had something else. 10 years of relationships in the logistics industry and an intimate, detailed understanding of exactly how companies like Sterling operated, what they needed, and where they were vulnerable. I started small, really small. I partnered with a property manager I'd known for years, someone who'd always respected me and was, frankly, disgusted by what happened with Sterling. We started with one underperforming warehouse on the edge of town. I didn't own it. I managed it, restructured the leases, brought in better tenants, and turned a property that was bleeding money into one that was profitable within a year. Then we did it again and again. It took 4 years before I had enough capital and credibility to start acquiring properties myself, rather than just managing them. It took 6 more before one of those properties happened to be a distribution hub in a city where Sterling, now operating under the name Sterling Dynamics, had signed a 15-year lease. I didn't plan that. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't hunting for them specifically. But when my team flagged that one of our newest acquisitions had a major tenant whose name made my stomach drop, I sat with it for a long time. And then I smiled for the first time in years. Here's what most people don't understand about commercial leases. Tenants rarely meet their landlords. There are property management companies, leasing agents, layers and layers of corporate structure between the name on the lease and the name on the deed. For 3 years, Sterling Dynamics paid rent to a holding company. They had no idea who owned it. I watched their lease terms. I watched their expansion. I watched Marcus give interviews about visionary leadership and Elena get featured in industry magazines as one of 40 under 40 disruptors. Neither of them ever mentioned my name. Not once. In their version of the story, Sterling had always been theirs. Then, last year, their lease came up for renewal. I could have raised the rent. I could have refused to renew and forced them into a scramble to relocate an entire distribution operation with 60 days' notice, which, in this industry, can functionally cripple a company for months. I didn't do either of those things. Not yet. Instead, I requested a meeting. In person. As the owner of the holding company, under my actual name, for the first time in 10 years. I'll never forget Elena's face when I walked into that conference room. Marcus actually stood up so fast he knocked his coffee over. "David," he said. We didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. That was kind of the point. I sat down. I opened my folder. And for the next 40 minutes, I laid out exactly what I owned, exactly what their lease terms were, exactly how much their operations depended on the 3 properties, yes, 3, that I now controlled across their distribution network. I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't gloat, not really. I simply explained the new terms. I wasn't going to evict them. I wasn't going to bankrupt the company I'd built, because despite everything, 300 employees still depended on it. And most of them had nothing to do with what Marcus and Elena did to me. But I was buying back in, as a silent investor, with board representation, and with very specific conditions about transparency, governance, and, this was non-negotiable, a full, public correction of the company's founding history. Marcus tried to argue. Elena, to her credit, just looked at me and said, "We deserve this." They signed that I'm not going to pretend this story has a perfectly clean ending. My marriage didn't come back. Those years I lost with my daughter, I can't get those back either, no matter how much money is in my accounts now. But last month, I walked into Sterling's headquarters, my headquarters again in part, and for the first time in a decade, my name was back on a door. Not the biggest door, not even my old office, just a small plaque that says Founder outside a conference room. It's enough. They thought they could erase 10 years of my life with a key card that stopped working and a folder of doctor paperwork. It took me a decade, but I bought it all back, not in one dramatic moment, but brick by brick, lease by lease, until the ground they were standing on belonged to me again. If you've ever been pushed out, written off, or had someone try to erase your story, remember this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's just patience and owning the building.